Hi, I'm Dave Cass. I'm the Head of Instructional Design at Maastricht School of Management. I'm also the Head of Leadership and I teach entrepreneurship. I'm making a recording today because there was a problem with the recording of the webinar we did yesterday, so I'm re-recording the 20 minutes. But I'll also try and add in any elements that came up from questions that were asked so that as much as possible is covered so you don't miss out. Enough about me. What I should say is, think about it. If you are, say, using case studies and you've asked your students to read the night before, and then when you actually come to class, you find that a certain percentage of them haven't actually read or pre-prepared before you do your workshop or your lesson, then hopefully I'm going to cover something today in world building which might help you in terms of actually getting something small enough and effective enough to run in the class. But I'm also going to talk about a tool that I use so that we can go beyond that and create, for me, business simulations from MBA or Masters and Masters students, but show you what I've done so that maybe it encourages you to try creating little simulations for whatever your subjects are using artificial intelligence that can be really effective extra additions to your course and for your students. So that's kind of the scope of what I'll be talking about. Now I should add that for us, we find all our students are using ChatGPT, at least ChatGPT. So for me, ChatGPT is the tool of choice that I'm going to be talking about with you today. And it doesn't matter if you've got paid or free version. There's nothing that I can show you today you wouldn't be able to do if you just had the free version. But obviously, if you've got the paid version, then you've got more in-depth analysis. And so the quality of what you might produce can vary accordingly. With regards any AI that you might use, 95% of people just accept the output that's given to it. And what I mean by that is that the AI voice and tone and language style of answering what you're doing has been set up in San Francisco. And as you can see by this slide, you are all different individuals that want different tones, teaching different subjects. So actually you want to customize the AI so it produces something which is more in line with your teaching style, the tone, whatever your subject is. And what I encourage you to do, and certainly with ChatGPT, is on the left-hand side, go down to your name or in settings, click on it, and you can add in there the sorts of information which I've got here written down in the bottom to customize the GPT to better suit the output you want. For instance, at Maastricht University, we teach in UK English, not American English. And so I don't want a document from ChatGPT that is creating something in the wrong language, in other words, American English, because it's a pain to have to change everything once I use it. So I get it filled in there. So I really encourage you to actually try and customize the settings to suit what you're wanting. And if you do this, that kind of puts you in the top 5% of users of that AI. It's a bit like if you use Excel. If somebody knows how to use pivot tables, which is really easy, but that actually puts you in the top 5%. So it's really worth doing. And believe me, you will see the difference straight away in the quality of the output if you customize it to what you want. So that's enough on customized settings, but actually it's really quite important because within the way I use ChatGPT or an AI is I'm creating mini case studies. So I don't go to the case center. I mean, I don't have to pay for something from the case center that might be 12 pages long, even longer, and maybe addresses 3 of the issues or the learning goals that I want. I could actually imagine I found an article on Harvard Business Review for me. I can look at it, we can analyze it. I can then add in learning goals that I want, and I can write lecture notes, and I can write student notes to create a workshop and a mini case study that maybe the students in class, so not the night before, read for 5 to 10 minutes, and then we get into a focused workshop activity so they cover the learning goals, and then we can go on from there. And more, that's the style that we are using at Maastricht School of Management. so we get away from this students not prepared before classes. And getting students to read nowadays is really quite tough, I'm sure you'll agree. What I'm going to talk about now, though, is creating something extra, which is a business simulation for me, could be something else for you, but I use ChatGPT create these things so that the students can link from canvases we use directly into using the AI in an imaginary world to actually use tools and see whatever we've taught in class to actually test it and understand its use in a simulated real world environment. And how do we do this? Well, I said I'm using ChatGPT. So within ChatGPT, I actually use custom GPTs. And these are like little robots you create, or AI robots or golems that you program for specific tasks. And it will do what you've told it to do. In my case, create a world for testing or for learning X, Y, and Z. So how do we do that? Well, to get into custom GPTs, if you look on the left-hand side of ChatGPT, you'll see GPT here. And actually what you want to do is to click Explore, and that gets you into the page for custom GPTs. Now, if you've never done this before, I strongly suggest that you look at the functions here of GPTs, featured, top picks, etc., and actually just try out some of the GPTs that people have published. So custom GPTs, maybe for education, maybe for writing, doesn't matter. Just have a play with them so you have a feel of what a custom GPT can do. And then when you're ready, and I'm going to show you some ways of doing it, I really encourage you to press create and then actually create a custom GPT. Now, this 20 minutes that I've got is not going to teach you how to create a custom GPT. If you want to do that, I strongly suggest you do what I did, is go to the University of YouTube. There's plenty of videos out there that can show you very quickly, and it's really easy, how to create a mini custom GPT. And once you've done one and you've broken through that threshold of your first one, you'll really get the hang of it. But I'm going to talk about what I've used to encourage you to delve into world building and see exactly actually what you can do with something as simple as a custom GPT. So, how do I world build, in my case, thinking about and be effective in engaging world building environments my students will want to engage in as part of their learning? Well, I went back to my childhood, to be honest with you. And if you were a teenager in the early 80s, and particularly if you're male, you probably have tried one of these books. So these were like mini Dungeons and Dragons books, and the concept was really simple. You could play them on your own, and the first page had a set of rules and how you'd war fight and defeat monsters. Not important for us, but the concept was you then open the next page, and this started the world building. So the page you'd read, and it would paint a picture of where you are now. You've woken up on a beach. It would describe what's around you, and then it would give you maybe 3 or 4 options. In this case, you can turn right along the beach, left along the beach, or straight ahead into the jungle. If you turn right, it would say turn to page 233. If you want to turn left, to page 50. And so what it would do is, through the pages, it was almost like hyperlink pages, but manually doing it. You would work your way through the puzzle, the dungeon, and hopefully work your way to the end. So what I did was got one of these books, and with ChatGPT set up in a project element of ChatGPT, we analysed actually the structure of one of these books. And here is sort of the structure that you end up with. And if you imagine each of these hexes is a page, and then so somebody starts their journey in the blue and gets down to the green, the end of their journey. So that's what I'm trying to create in a business environment. So I've looked at this book, and now with AI, I'm recreating the book digitally hyperlinked, use it within an AI for a journey set in a business environment. And for me, teaching leadership, testing leadership skills. And as people make their decisions, each of these decision points, you can measure against what you're testing for leadership decision making, and at the end of it you can produce a report on somebody's styles or effectiveness or maybe problems that they have. All well and good, but actually using one of those books or this style of creating a learning tool, it was very effective. Students loved it, but there's a number of problems that were inherent in the books that become apparent certainly when you're creating a business simulation. The first one is, if you look at some of the hexes, they're red. Well, in the books, that's where you die. And plainly, I don't want anybody to die in my business simulation. So we don't want anything that ends in a dead end. So everybody has to eventually somehow get to the A grade at the end. And the other one was that because of these dead ends, and it happened for real with the books, people might lose their way and just think, oh, I don't understand what I'm doing here, and give up halfway. This was a problem with the books, largely because people were dying. Nobody's dying, so people will work their way through the end. But the big problem is a lot of effort to create this, a huge amount of effort. But then there's one scenario, that's it. And there's no replayability. To be honest with you, once you've tested, and students would say, yeah, that's great, I accept that report, and there's no rationale to go back and play the game again. So I've got problems of playability and variability, and I want to address that. So how did I do this? Well, I went to a more modern imaginary game. This is a game called Downfall, and you actually create a civilization, imaginary game for 3 people. You create a civilization, and then you create a fatal flaw, and a number of rounds, you play different roles, and you collapse the civilization. Now what I did was fed the rules into an AI, analysed the gameplay, the rules and regulations, so that it understood how the game should be played. And then I got the AI, it's a 3-person game, so I'm on my own, to play 2 people, and we played a number of games testing how an AI uses its imagination to play something like this. And it worked really well. And then at the end of it, to analyse how we played those games, and then to recreate a scenario of a multinational company, so not a civilization, now create a multinational company, now create some fatal flaws, and create the sort of the documents and evidence that a consultant might see, emails, financial sheets, etc., so that you could collapse the company down to a point where it's in the balance where it's recoverable or not. And then my MBA students would come in, they'd examine the evidence, and it got to the point where if they did certain right things, use tools well, they could save the company or provide direction to save the company in the classroom environment. And if not, then obviously the company's going to go downhill. So that was great in creating an imaginary workshop activity, so a world building scenario of a company that students could come into. But that was still a single scenario, and replayability, there is no replayability in that, but it did actually create a very good and effective workshop activity. So I still hadn't addressed the issue of variability and replayability, and I might add, I'm wanting something which can also work for students who are 100% online. So I need something as well that is not just creating a workshop activity to be done in class with students. How am I going to do that? Well, I actually then looked at, with AI working with me, and looking at current role-playing games. Now, if you take either of these 2 games, Achtung Cthulhu for instance, the rules for that are about 430 pages. On top of that, you then might have a scenario that is 140 pages. So I had to have a way of using these documents and storing them, and you can in the GPT have them as reference documents in PDF, so that because it's in the GPT, and I've said within the GPT it must only reference these documents, then I'm restricting, so there's no hallucinations. I'm basically restricting it to the facts and information that I've been given. But what I really wanted to do was work and understand with an AI playing these games, so that I could see how to tweak an AI to play the role of a dungeon master or a games master. And if you've never played an RPG role-playing game, the way it works is you might have, let's say, 4 or 5 people playing personalities in this game, but there's one person who has actually set up the scenario, has a god's eye view, describes things, so is creating the world in descriptions, and makes sure, tests people, and basically works the way people from A all the way through to Z, through things, and making decisions about what might have happened or may not happened. So a god's eye view of controlling, making it really interesting a game, maximum imagination, but also forcing players to make decisions and then reacting to the decisions they make of what's likely to happen. So that's what I'm wanting an AI to create. And so I worked with it because if I could learn how to play this, then I could use the analysis from the AI and now create a business simulation with using a custom GPT. So that's what we're going to talk about now, how to do that with a custom GPT. This is hyper complicated. I'm now going to show you that very easy little custom GPT you can make. And you're first of all going to have to understand that we're going to be writing in a program language called JSON. Now, if the thought of program languages scares you to death, don't worry about it. You're not actually writing this. We're going to get ChatGPT, in my case, to write the JSON file for what I need. So I'm going to give you a prompt now to have a look at. And actually, I urge you to actually do this for real. If you look at the 2 sentences we've got here, the first sentence is merely asking for a JSON, and it's limited to JSON programming instructions for custom GPT of 8,000 characters, because the interface that you would paste whatever this writes in is limited to 8,000 characters. There are ways of getting around that, but for you, just accept the fact it's got to be below 8,000 characters that you're cutting, pasting when you eventually create a custom GPT. But if you look at the second sentence, that's the prompt that we would put into your AI. Now, using that prompt, if you just put that into something like ChatGPT, if you don't like what it gives you, there's not a lot in that sentence that is variable. So if I don't like something, how do I know how to change what's written in that single one sentence that will have the effect that I want? So I don't understand, if I'm just writing in English, how the computer is interpreting that one sentence, and I've got hardly any variables to play with to finesse a custom GPT, your little robot, AI robot, to make something that what you want. So if you type this in to ChatGPT, this is the JSON that it's going to write. This is how AI interprets that second sentence. Don't worry, you don't need to read everything, but actually in this case you can just press pause on the video and have a look. But I'm going to focus in on one element of it to just give you a feel of the detail. So almost every sentence within the whole thing are areas that I could vary, so I could tweak. And within here also there needs to be, you will only be drawing information from the documents which I've set up and stores files within the custom GPT as well, so you don't get hallucinations. But anyway, I can change the stakeholders if I want. I can change the tension. I can change tone. I could even set it in a certain part of the world. If you're working, I don't know, in Japan, maybe you would want it to be actually doing something in Japan. So have a look at this and then try it yourself and create a small GPT just using that original prompt that was in the last slide, and then make a custom GPT, and you will be amazed at the results. And normally what I do is I ask ChatGPT to create the JSON file, and for the custom GPT, the first one, I'm not changing anything. I just put it straight in, activate the custom GPT, and just see what happens. And if I'm happy, great. If I'm not, that's the time when I come, adjust the JSON file, cut and paste it, the amendments into it, and then rerun the GPT, and I keep changing until I get what I want. So that's really the way you can set things up for a really effective and very simple GPT. I did this last month in Romania with my MBA students. And one of the students, he actually also said within this, and I want it to be set in Romania, and was astounded when it came up with something that a company, that there'd been issues with a company 2 days before that hit the news. He got a complete analysis of everything that was happening, and then it set him questions in a sort of Socratic way so that he had a more in-depth understanding of the issues at hand. And then it asked him, well, how might you deal with this? And then followed on with a conversation about how he as a leader, as a CEO, might deal with a problem like this. So really valuable. Try it. Simple. But anyway, I've created a number of these. And what I do basically is within Canvas, you'll get a link to my custom GPT. I also do this for private companies. And so the student just clicks on it. So that we've had the lesson, they've had the tools, click, now enter this environment and practice it. See it in real world, and you make a decision. And at the end of whatever they've done, they might get a report, but there's playability. So students can go back and be given a totally different scenario as well. And they can go off tangentially as well. So it's almost like jazz in that I've set parameters and things that will be referenced to what I want, and then we use the imagination of the AI to keep creating new worlds so the student can interact with. That's the concept. Now let's take a case, much more complicated case, and certainly one you can't have any hallucinations for, that I was involved with. Last year, I went to a conference, higher education conference in the UK, and one of the speakers there, she was a doctor in a training hospital and actually training oncology doctors. And she said one of the problems that they had was they could teach them all sorts. So the doctors had the knowledge of how to treatments, etc., etc. But what they weren't able to practice is the pressures and the realism of what happens in a ward. And so she had used a board game that people can buy, nothing to do with dealing with cancer. And she had adapted that board game so they could actually simulate being in a ward. And what she did was great. But I said to her, I'm fairly sure I can use AI and do something differently. So I created a custom GPT within which were documents and her textbooks that they would use. So that's the reference material that you designate when customizing GPT only from these sources. But it understood I wanted replay and all the things that you want from a role-playing game that I'd learned, that I'd input as well into what I required, so that students could do three things. First of all, they had three options with the GPT. They could designate a chapter in the textbook or the study material that they had and say, okay, I want to work with that. And they could interrogate that chapter, and the custom GPT would act as a Socratic teacher. So not providing them the answers, but setting them the problem perhaps, and then supporting them through it and getting them to work out the answers to the problems. So absolutely not just giving people the answer. That's not what we want. Could also set multiple choice questions or in-depth questions for them from that chapter. So that was one of the modes. Second mode was where you might say, okay, what I want to do is in-depth on a one-to-one basis with a patient that has a particular type of cancer. So this was a bit more complex, and you're dealing with an individual and you're working your way through the priorities. And of course, because it's only referring back to the real textbook and the real treatments, etc., then you're actually, well, if it corrected you or assessed you, then it was correct information, no hallucination. And the third one, which was the real fun part, was free play. And all it would say was, okay, fine, you've arrived on the ward, it's your first day on the ward, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, the senior nurse has just arrived and says, okay, we have 4 patients, and we describe the names, you get all the details of the patients, their symptoms, issues, things that have been measured. Again, all agreeing with the sort of data that had come from the textbooks, so no hallucinations there. And then say to the student in this environment, okay, what are your priorities? Who are we treating first? What are you going to treat? And then because I set it up for gameplay, then non-player characters might come in. So we might have a senior doctor who would come in that would question the student on their decision making, perhaps as a Socratic a teacher, if you like, saying, I understand why you've done this, but have you ever considered X, Y, and Z, which might change your priorities? Or perhaps as somebody who is being a little bit more aggressive, so creating more tension. So that basically, by this world building and playability, infinitely variable and responding to the student. And also, part of the assessment was assessing their bedside manner and the way they communicated with the patients as well. So giving them some feedback, not just on their analysis, but also the manner in which they spoke and dealt with the problem and the priorities. So that's a real world example, and she was blown away when we set this thing up. So that gives you a spectrum of what I've been doing and how I've been using AI to create worlds. But it's I think important that you got a chance to play with some of these things as well. So on this slide, pause the video and then use the QR codes. The custom GPT on the left, this is one, I've also created similar ones for companies, but this is one we use at MSM. And this GPT will throw you into an environment as a consultant. It's going to set you a problem that's happening in some business somewhere in the world. I have no idea because it's variable. It's going to do whatever it wants. Set you a problem, and then you just go off, and it's like playing a role-playing game, but with you making decisions. And eventually, you will come to a point where it'll say, okay, you've dealt with the problem and all the details and the stakeholders, etc. Well done. It will give you a report on how you've done, and then say, okay, for phase 2 of this, we can go further in depth with this problem. Or if you want, you can say, start again. I'll give you a completely different scenario and issues, and you can go. Also, in some scenarios, you might even have a handheld artificial intelligence that actually you can use as well, which might help you thinking about tools. So I urge you to play with that. For us, we also use this one when we have our team going to all the events where we're trying to recruit students. So you can imagine we've got our stall here, a queue of students wanting to talk to our advisors, and rather than just standing there getting bored, we actually use this QR code set up on a card so they can actually play a role-play game, which gives them a feel for the sorts of topics and things that we teach at Maastricht School of Management. So again, getting into the idea of how we do our education. So that's that GPT on the left. On the right, I've set up a GPT here that is aligned to a case study. You obviously can't see the case study, but if you use this, you could see from reading here, basically we're talking about 3 separate tools that we use for analyzing culture, and also the last to basically see if there's problems across teams. Now what this a GPT will do will actually can help teach you and help you walk through understanding each of the models. And then what it will also do is then say, okay, right, now in accordance with the case study, how might you assess this? Now you haven't read the case study, but you could just make up an answer and then see how it responds. And I think for this one, what's quite important is getting a feel of how it can act as a Socratic educator. So not just giving the answers to the students. So anyway, those are 2 that I urge you to use. The sort of questions that came up in the webinar that we did yesterday covered things like how do we stop hallucinations? I've mentioned that. Actually, within your instructions within the GPT, and before you ask it to write in JSON, make sure it's going to have an element in that saying you only draw from source material within the documents that I attach. So that stops that. So it's using those as its facts and figures, but using its imaginations and things from the world to paint a picture of a world in the background, but focusing on real information that you've got. That's one. One is actually to do with the students themselves. Is okay, what do they do if they don't have paid ChatGPT? Yeah, most of our students will have paid for ChatGPT, but if they haven't, then that's limiting. But what we need to do is These are extra to the what you would consider the course. So if a student wants to be able to, then yes, they can go and do these extra things. If we are running a course that's not for degree students, but perhaps it's for a custom course that we're doing for corporate clients, then they will have to pay. So they'll actually have paid for that. So everybody has that capability and can go into depth. But then they're paying for that sort of skill. And I think the other one I would say is that we at Maastricht School of Management, we seem to be ahead of a lot of people with regards how we're using AI. We're encouraging our students to use artificial intelligence, not just ChatGPT, but other tools as well, because at the end of the day, after they've done their studies, they're expected by business to actually understand these tools. And it's not enough, as I've seen in many places, saying we have to stop students using them for cheating. No. We have to actually look at how they're using the tools and the level of understanding of the issues they've got. So that's what we've done with AI to help us redesign our courses and the style of our teaching so it's much more engaging, particularly for online students. And I should add, one of the things that drove me down this path was I also teach negotiation as part of my leadership course. And an online student. Imagine if you've got an online student in the South Pole, sat in front of a computer. How are they going to practice negotiation skills? Because they're on their own. They've just got a computer in the course. Well, I have now created GPTs that understand the negotiation scenario that the student's going to use and can actually play one or maybe two players in either a face-to-face or a multi-party negotiation scenario, and they can actually negotiate. And the style and how they did, we can actually provide a report back to them on some issues that they had of the style of negotiation. So even as something as complex as that, if you world build and set your AI up, your custom GPT properly, can be really effective. And once you've set up a GPT, it's just a click for a student on Canvas from the link, and then they're in the world you create. So that's it for me. I strongly encourage you to dive in and using custom GPTs or GPTs to help you create small micro case studies and workshops, and in particular, see how you can take that on to then, you've now learnt the tools, now let's practice them in a simulated real world environment, and that makes that huge leap from the lower elements of Bloom's to higher elements. Good luck.